Hey everybody, it's Karl again. Thank you for joining me on tip number 15 on how to buy a property. The best 23 tips, the best 23 home buying tips I've learned in 23 years. Tip number 15 is a really good one. I'd like you to stick with me on this one. It's going to sound a little unusual, but if you hang on with me for just a couple minutes, I promise I'll make it make sense at the end. Point number 15, or tip number 15, I should say, is increase your earnest money. Increase your earnest money. Right? Here's why. Buyers many times are reluctant, to put a lot of earnest money down because of a fear of loss. They are afraid that they're going to lose money if something should go haywire. That makes sense. I understand, right? The problem that it creates, however, is that sellers use your earnest money as a judge of your seriousness. Unfortunately, when all things are equal, if you got two offers that are essentially the same, they're going to net the seller pretty much the same. They're just trying to figure out which one's going to be the easiest to close, which one's the most serious buyer. And as in the last point we mentioned about concessions and contingencies, you want to minimize those. Well, in this particular circumstance, you want to increase your earnest money too, because if you don't have any contingencies, you don't have any concessions particularly that you're asking for, or very few, and your earnest money is higher, well, then certainly that's going to help you when all things are being considered. I wrote down point number 1. Generally speaking, there are many protections for your earnest money. Many. Now, as I said earlier about locking a deal up, typically your contract has provisions in there and protections for your earnest money. It's not as if it goes right into the seller's pocket. It goes typically to a title company or an attorney in your state, depending on the kind of situation you're in, right? So increase it as high as you feel comfortable, because you know that it's not going into their college fund or something like that. And in a multiple offer situation, as I mentioned, if you've got 2 or 3 offers and one guy's at $500 and another guy's at $1,000 and another person's at $2,000 earnest money, let's say, or any variation thereof, depending on your market, understand that as a seller, you would probably look at the seller's provision as $2,000, or whatever earnest money, that seems pretty good, right? And you might be more inclined to take that, right? I wrote down point number 2, sellers perceive it as something they can get. Sellers, they tend to think that this is something that they can get when they see, on the offer sheet, they see the price and the earnest money. They think, well, gosh, if something happens, then that's something I can get, because you think that too, right? But the reality is that in many situations, and again, I'm not an attorney and I'm not an agent in your state. I'm just an agent in a broker in Arizona. But in most state contracts, it's quite a process to get that earnest money. And a seller, honestly, they don't want your earnest money. They want the home sold. But they sort of figure, well, gosh, in a worst case scenario, what would happen? I might be able to get this one, right? But it doesn't mean you need to be reckless when you're making your offers. Don't be making offers willy-nilly on everybody. When you think about it, it does give you a little bit of a psychological advantage if you know in advance that it's virtually impossible, or you have to make a lot of errors in order for you to give up your earnest money. You can make your offer in confidence. You can make your earnest money a little bit higher perhaps than you might ordinarily, right? If you're trying to make sure you get a property, it can help make the difference with that seller, because psychologically the seller thinks they can get it. They make the offer, and you make the offer. They make their decision based on that alone sometimes. And gosh, there you go. You got yourself the house of your dreams. Tip number 3, remember, fortune favors the bold, right? If you're going to go for the home of your dreams, don't be dumb and lose it over something like this. Don't try and be cheap. Don't try and play games with the earnest money. Just go ahead and make your best offer first. Make your best earnest money offer. Make your least amount of contingencies and concessions, as we said before. And that's going to go a long way to help you get the home you want. Listen, guys, I really appreciate you passing this information on if you found it was helpful. I'd like to hear your comments as well and tell me, what other tips have you seen that have been helpful? So far, I've gone through 15 and I've got quite a few more. I'd like to hear what you've thought so far. Thanks a lot. And as always, I hope you have a powerful sales day. Take care.